Hey everybody, this is Rykard here again, and today I'm bringing you the next installment to my Pokemon Teams series. If you didn't catch the first episode, this series is all about making unique teams that either have some type of theme or uncommon strategy behind them that you don't normally run into in a standard battle. In today's episode, as you saw from the title, it is going to feature an NU Gravity team that I made using viewer suggestions on my live stream, which is where this team was almost entirely made. And just to talk about this team a little bit before I go more in depth with it, this team can be broken down into three different components. The first are the Pokemon that set up Gravity, which are Regirock and Exeggutor. Next are the defensive support Pokemon in Garbodor and Electros, and then the last component of this team are the Pokemon that are able to take full advantage of Gravity to dish out a lot of damage once it is set up, which are Raticate and Swanna. So before we delve any deeper into this team, it is first important to understand exactly what the move Gravity does and how to base a team around it. So to talk about how Gravity works before we get into anything else, I just wanted to copy and paste what I thought was the most comprehensive definition of how Gravity works and just read it aloud for all of you while I put it on your screen. So it starts off by saying for 5 turns, the evasion of all active Pokemon is multiplied by 60%. Now before I go on, I just wanted to talk about how unique of an effect this is, because with your opponents having their evasion lowered, you are actually able to hit them with inaccurate moves that would normally almost always miss. So for example, if you wanted to use Dynamic Punch or a move like Zap Cannon, which typically have 50% accuracy under the effects of Gravity, you would actually hit with these significantly more due to the fact that your opponent will be less able to dodge them. So that is something to keep in mind as I explain a lot of the movesets for the Pokemon later in this video. But to continue on, it says, at the time of use, Bounce, Fly, Magnet Rise, Skydrop, and Telekinesis end immediately for all active Pokemon. During the effect, Bounce, Fly, High Jump Kick, Magnet Rise, Skydrop, Splash, and Telekinesis are prevented from being used by all active Pokemon. Ground-type attacks, Spikes, Toxic Spikes, and the ability Arena Trap can affect Flying types, Pokemon with the ability Levitate, and Pokemon holding an air balloon. So overall, you can see how this ability has numerous effects and allow you to make use of moves with low accuracy much more effectively, hurt Pokemon with ground-type moves that you normally would not be able to hit them with, and damage Pokemon with entry hazards that would otherwise be unaffected by them. So with that, let's just jump right into talking about the first Pokemon selected for this team. So to start things off for the Pokemon selected for this team, we're going to begin by taking a look at this Regirock, which was given a careful nature to increase its special defense but lower its special attack, and the ability Clear Body. As far as the EVs are concerned, we're going to put 240 into our HP, 252 EVs into our special defense to max that out with the careful nature, and then the remainder 16 EVs into our speed, which was actually a suggestion by Xenon when we were making this video on making this set on my live stream. But for the item, we're also going to go with Leftovers as a way to recover a little bit of HP at the end of every turn, which is very important for this Pokemon since, as I mentioned before, he is one of the 2 Pokemon on this team that set up Gravity, so we're going to want to keep him around for a long time in battle. But for the moves on this Pokemon, we're going to start by giving it Stealth Rock as a way to set up those entry hazards to hurt our opponents every time I switch him, and then we're also going to give it the move Gravity, which, as I said before, is one of the 2 Pokemon on this team that set it up. But for the other moves to make use of Gravity, or potentially just hurt opponents on our opposing team, we're going to start by giving it Rock Slide as a way to damage them with a nice powerful stab move, and then we're also going to go with Zap Cannon. Now, this Pokemon does have access to Thunder Wave, but because Zap Cannon will be very accurate in Gravity, we can easily have a secondary attacking option that could potentially hurt our opponents for maybe super effective damage if they are weak to electric moves, because you don't normally see this move on a Regirock, and most water types would want to come in to deal some damage to Regirock anyway, so you could potentially catch them on the switch once Gravity is set up, hurt them for some super effective damage, and also paralyze them in the process, since Zap Cannon has a 100% chance to paralyze. Now, under the effects of Gravity, Zap Cannon has an accuracy of 83%, which is still pretty good, but you still can miss with it, so do not expect to hit with it all the time. And the reason for opting with Rock Slide over Stone Edge, even though Stone Edge will always hit under Gravity, is because you could potentially paraflinch with a combination of the paralysis from Zap Cannon and the 30% flinching chance that Rock Slide provides. And that was also a suggestion by someone else that was viewing the live stream at the time I was making this. But overall, Regirock is an extremely solid physical and special wall due to the fact that it has a naturally high physical defense, and we're maxing out its special defense, which is really fantastic because this Pokemon is able to take hits extremely well from both sides of the spectrum. Also, to just point out for those of you that might be wondering right now why we're running a little bit of speed on a Pokemon that has paralysis, well, you're not always going to have the opportunity to go for Zap Cannon, so it still is good to make Regirock faster than other Regirocks and other Pokemon in the same speed tier as Regirock is listed in. Up next, we have this Exeggutor, which we're going to start by giving this Pokemon a bold nature to increase its physical defense and lower its physical attack, and for the ability, we're going to be going with Harvest, which is this Pokemon's Dreamworld ability. As for the EVs, we're going to put 208 into HP, 252 EVs into our physical defense to max that out with the bold nature, and then the remainder 48 EVs into our speed to make this Pokemon quite a bit faster and outspeed Pokemon in the base 60 speed tier that it normally would not be able to outspeed under normal circumstances. And for the item, we're going to be going with the Citrus Berry as a way to recover this Pokemon's health by 25% every time we drop below 50% of our health. And this berry works incredibly well in combination with the Harvest ability, because if we are able to harvest the Citrus Berry back, that means we will also be able to recover more HP next time this Pokemon drops below 50% of its health, which is very essential for keeping this Pokemon alive, since as I mentioned before, this is the second Pokemon on this team that does set up Gravity, which you can see right there under the moves list. But to work along with Gravity, we're going to be going with Hypnosis as a way to put our opponents to sleep. Now, under the effects of Gravity, Hypnosis will always hit, which is very important to note, because that means once you have the Gravity up, you are pretty much guaranteed to put something asleep unless it does have the Insomnia ability. Now, the reason why we're going with Hypnosis over Sleep Powder is because there are quite a few Pokemon in the NU tier that do have the Sap Sipper ability and would normally easily be able to come in and take a Grass move and get a +1 attack boost from Exeggutor. So even though Hypnosis is a little bit more inaccurate under normal conditions when Gravity isn't up, Hypnosis is still the better option, since no Pokemon, unless they have Vital Spirit or Insomnia, are immune to Hypnosis. And to go along with these other two moves, we're going to be going with a combination of Psychic to dish out some pretty good stab damage, and then Leech Seed as a way to recover health every turn if we are able to get Leech Seed up against our opponent. Now, another important thing to mention with Leech Seed is that this move tends to cause a lot of switches, because once a Pokemon is Leech Seeded, they are going to want to switch out to get rid of that Leech Seed, which is why Exeggutor actually works extremely well in combination with Garbodor and Regirock, because those Pokemon are able to set up entry hazards for our team, and I'll get a little bit more into Garbodor on the next slide. But it is also important to note that Exeggutor and Regirock as a defensive pair work very well in combination with each other, because they do complement each other's weaknesses very well. And this is actually part of the reason why we switched to Exeggutor after originally having Musharna in this spot to set up Gravity, because Exeggutor just does Musharna's job quite a bit better, and also has access to Leech Seed for more recovery. I don't have to rely on Moonlight, which you would for Musharna for recovery, because we have our Citrus Berry and also Leech Seed, and we could also cause switches in that situation as well. So overall, Exeggutor is just an incredibly solid physical wall for this team. It has very unique typing and is able to do a lot, along with setting up Gravity to allow our inaccurate moves on our team to hit more often. Thirdly, we have this Garbodor, which we're going to start by giving it a Careful Nature to increase its special defense and lower its special attack. And for the ability, we're going to be going with Aftermath as a way to damage our opponents if this Pokemon is ever KO'd by a contact move. But for the EVs, we're going to start by giving it 240 EVs into its HP, 128 EVs into its physical defense, 92 EVs into its special defense, and then the remainder 48 EVs into its speed to make this Pokemon quite a bit faster and able to take hits very well from both the physical and special sides. And for the item, we're going to be going with Black Sludge as a way to recover a little bit of HP at the end of every turn. But for the moves on this Pokemon, we're going to start by giving it Spikes, which is extremely important for this Pokemon to set up, because we are going to be using Gravity, and as I said before, Pokemon that are normally immune to spikes, such as flying Pokemon and levitators, will be hurt by spikes every time they switch in if the effects of Gravity are up, which is very useful for allowing this Pokemon to deal residual damage to our entire opponent's team every time they switch in. But to go along with the spikes, we're going to give Garbodor 3 attacking moves, which are Gunk Shot, Rock Blast, and Drain Punch. Gunk Shot is going to be your main stab attack. It is also the most powerful poison move that this Pokemon learns, even though it is a little bit inaccurate. But because of the inaccuracy, we actually don't really have to worry about it as often, because under the effects of Gravity, Gunk Shot will always hit, which is very important for a Pokemon since this move has such a high base power, and you would be very surprised as to how much damage you can actually do with a Gunk Shot from a Garbodor, even though we're not even putting any attack investment into this Pokemon. The reason for running Rock Blast is a way to counter Baton Pass teams that want to lead off with a Ninjask, because if you get 3 hits with a Rock Blast as your opponent sets up a sub with their Ninjask, you will actually KO this Pokemon immediately right off the bat, which is incredibly useful against those types of teams because you can completely ruin their Baton Pass chain on turn 1 if you see that this Pokemon or your opponent's team is using a Ninjask. And then lastly, the reason for going with Drain Punch is just for some extra super effective coverage, as well as also allowing Garbodor to gain a little bit of HP back every time it does use this move, which could in turn result in this Pokemon being able to have an extra turn to set up spikes to allow us to harass our opponent further with some entry hazard damage. Now, as I mentioned before, the spikes also work incredibly well with Exeggutor due to the fact that we will be using Leech Seed on that Pokemon and causing switches because our opponents would probably not want to stay in with the Leech Seed on them because they're giving us health and also they're losing health in the process. So spikes is definitely something that is very well supported by the other members of this team, and Garbodor is an excellent addition to this team because of that. Up next, we have the 4th and final defensive Pokemon of this team, which is this Eelektross. So we're going to start by giving it a Calm Nature to increase its special defense and lower its physical attack, and then we're going to be going with the ability Levitate. Now, it is important to keep in mind that because Eelektross is an electric type, under the effects of gravity, this Levitate ability will be cancelled out and it will be taking super effective damage from ground type moves. However, because you, as the person using this team, controls the effects of gravity, it is very easy to completely avoid the situation entirely, and in my experience with using this team, it has never been a problem. So more often than not, because gravity isn't always going to be up, you will actually be able to make use of the immunity provided by Levitate, which is something to keep in mind when using this Pokemon. But for the EVs, we're going to start by putting 240 into our HP, 252 EVs into our special defense to max that out with a Calm Nature, and then a remainder 16 EVs into our speed to make this Eelektross just a little bit faster than other Eelektrosses, and also outspeed other Pokemon listed in the same speed tier that Eelektross is listed in. And for the item, we're going to be going with Leftovers as a way to recover a little bit of HP at the end of every turn. For the moves on this set, the first one that we're going to go with is Volt Switch. Now, I am fully aware that Eelektross does learn Zap Cannon, which could be an idea to go with on this Pokemon, but because you don't want to be using Gravity with Eelektross in, since it does negate your Levitate ability, and the utility provided by Volt Switch is far greater than the added paralysis that can be provided by Zap Cannon, Volt Switch definitely seemed like the better option, especially with allowing Eelektross to give us some much needed switch initiative with this team, allowing us to take advantage of our opponents if they do decide to switch out on a turn that we bring Eelektross in. But to give you some more type coverage, we're going to be going with a combination of Giga Drain and Flamethrower, which with your electric type stab and Volt Switch will allow you to hit a ton of Pokemon for super effective damage, which is very useful for allowing this Pokemon to not only be a very good special wall with our EV investment and nature, but also be pretty offensive as well because of the type coverage you get with this Pokemon. And for the last move on the set, we're going to be going with Dragon Tail, which is very useful for this Pokemon to not only phase things out, but also to allow us to rack up some entry hazard damage that we're going to be obviously wanting to get on our opponents, since we are making use of both Stealth Rock and Spikes on this team, provided by the Regirock and the Garbodor. So overall, Eelektross' use on this team is pretty much to do a little bit of everything. It gives you switch initiative, it gives you a special wall, it gives you a ton of type coverage, and also a phaser that will allow you to gain some much needed extra damage on your opponents every time they are phased out by the Dragon Tail. Moving on to the more offensive portion of this team, we're going to start with this Swanna by giving it a Tib in Nature to increase its speed but lower its physical attack, and for the ability we're going to be going with Hydration. As for the EVs, we're going to put 252 into its special attack, 4 into its special defense, and then 252 EVs into its speed to give us its highest special attack and speed possible with the Tib in Nature. And for the item, we're going to be going with a Choice Scarf as a way to increase this Pokemon's speed by 1 stage, while also locking us into 1 move in the process. But for the moves on the set, we're going to start first by giving it Hurricane, which is the strongest flying type move strongest special flying type move that Swanna is able to learn. It only has 70 base accuracy, but on the effects of gravity, this move will always hit, and for such a powerful move, locking yourself into Hurricane once the effects of gravity are up is incredibly threatening for your opponent's team if they do not have a Pokemon that will resist your Hurricanes. This move also has a 30% chance to confuse, which, if it does occur, could be very frustrating for your opponent to deal with, since once they're confused, they will only have a 50% chance to attack you. But to go along with Hurricane, we're going to be going with Surf as a secondary stab option, and then Ice Beam as a way to round off the set to give you some more super effective coverage on this Swanna. And lastly, we're going to be going with Sleep Talk as a way for Swanna to become a sleep absorber for this team, since nothing else on our team would want to be put to sleep. So if you are able to come in on a predicted sleep move, such as Sleep Powder, you can easily still use the Swanna by clicking Sleep Talk, because you will randomly select one of the 3 moves on your set because you aren't using this with Rest, so you don't really have to worry about not attacking that turn. It is also important to note that because most users of sleep-inducing moves will use Sleep Powder, they are grass types, so you actually have a 66% chance to hit them with a super effective move with Sleep Talk once you select that and are asleep. So that does mean that Swanna matches up incredibly well against most grass types in the tier. It is also important to note that Swanna actually outspeeds a ton of Pokemon with the Choice Scarf, including most other Choice Scarfers in the NU tier, including Pokemon like Primeape and Pinsir and things like that. So that is important to note, meaning that Swanna will be a very effective Pokemon on your team for outspeeding a ton of common threats and dishing out some really intense damage through the use of Hurricane and its other attacking moves. And lastly, we have this Raticate, which is actually a set for Raticate that I posted in a recent sets video that I've made. But to talk about it again, we're going to start by giving it a Jolly Nature to increase its speed but lower its special attack, and then we're going to be going with the ability Hustle. As for the EVs, we're going to put 252 into our physical attack, 4 into our defense, and then 252 EVs into our speed to max out our speed and physical attack with the Jolly Nature. And for the item, we're going to be going with a Choice Band as a way to give us some pretty massive power in combination with the Hustle ability. And for the moves on the set, we're going to be going with Return as your main stab option, Crunch to allow you to have some more type coverage to hit ghost types that Return is obviously not going to be able to hurt very hard, Quick Attack for some much needed priority on this team since nothing else on this team actually has it, and then U-Turn as a way to potentially switch out in any bad matchups, and also give a switch initiative if we do predict our opponent to switch out when we bring this Raticate in. So overall, this Pokemon is just incredibly powerful. I have talked about it before, so I'm trying not to get too in-depth with it again since you all already know about this Pokemon. But just to talk about why this Pokemon was selected, basically, this was actually a comment on the Raticate video, but saying using Gravity with Hustle under the effects of Gravity means that you never have to worry about any of your attacks missing, because as you know, Hustle actually makes the attacks of all of your moves 80% of what they normally are. So Return, which normally has 100% accuracy, is going to be an 80% accurate move, but under the effects of Gravity, this will be moved back up to 100%, meaning that this Raticate can be extremely effective under Gravity since you hardly ever have to worry about any of its attacks ever missing, while also getting some incredible power between the Hustle ability and Choice Band, and also much needed priority with Quick Attack and Switch Initiative with U-Turn. So to now overview all the weaknesses and resistances of this team, I have this slide here which will show you exactly what this Pokemon is weak to and resists. So to start off with the resistances, I just wanted to show how we pretty much have most of the types resisted with the exception of Rock, Ice, Dragon, and Dark. And the great thing about a lot of the resistances that we do have is that we have at least 2 Pokemon resisting a lot of the different types that we do resist, meaning that we have actually a couple of different switch-ins to a variety of different situations, which is very cool. As far as the weaknesses are concerned though, the 2 biggest weaknesses on this team are to Fighting type and Ground type moves. As far as Fighting type is concerned though, this is offset a little bit by the fact that we do have 3 Pokemon that are resisting the Fighting type moves that our Raticate and our Regirock would be weak to, and this was done on purpose to offset that just a little bit and make the weakness a little bit less obvious. And also we do have 3 Pokemon that are weak to Ground type moves under the effects of Gravity, only 2 under the when Gravity is not up due to the fact that Electros does have the Levitate ability, and that is also offset by 3 Pokemon that are resistant the Ground type, even though we do have 2 Pokemon weak to it. So it was kind of a combination of figuring out what actually would work well for this team and how the other members of this team will support the weaknesses of the other members as well. The only thing about this team that I wish we did have was an Ice resist, but that is very hard to come by, so unfortunately that was not a possibility with this team. However, more often than not, you will be able to find something to resist a certain type of attack that your opponent is going for with this team, or at least take the hit very well with one of the other members of your team and either threaten that Pokemon out or just kill it outright if it does stay in. So lastly, what I wanted to do is put up a slide of a few other Pokemon that you may wish to consider if you ever decide to make another Gravity team based upon the one that I've showed you, or kind of swap some Pokemon in and out on the team that I've already shown you here today. So the first Pokemon that I would highly recommend you consider if you do want to make a gravity team is Golurk. And there are a number of reasons why you would like to use this Pokemon. The first of which is that it can set up entry hazards, it can also set up gravity, and it also has an incredibly powerful earthquake that will obviously hit everything once gravity is set up. It is also important to note that because of its ghost typing, this Pokemon also functions as a very useful spin blocker, which could be useful on a gravity team due to the fact that you're going to be wanting to set up spikes. So having a Pokemon that is able to block a rapid spin is very useful because you want those entry hazards up all the time. Another Pokemon to consider is Zweilous, which is actually a Pokemon that you can run either offensively or defensively under the effects of gravity very successfully. The offensive reason is because this Pokemon is another hustle user, much like Raticate, and it has access to the most powerful outrage in the game, which is something to keep in mind, especially in a tier where there are very few steel types to resist the outrage. But if you do want to run Zweilous defensively, you could easily run a Sleep Talk set with Dragon Tail as a way to obviously phase things out and get more residual damage through entry hazards, while also keeping this Pokemon's HP up through the use of Rest as well, and it functions extremely well as either a special or physical wall if you choose to EV it as such. Another important Pokemon to consider is Scolipede, because this is another Spikes user in the tier. It is incredibly fast, unlike other Spikes users like Cacturne and Maractus, so that is important to keep in mind, and under the effects of gravity, you will never miss with a Mega Horn, which is something to keep in mind as well. But as far as 3 other defensive Pokemon you might want to consider that can all set up gravity, Regice is one that works extremely effectively, mainly because you can use gravity along with Blizzard, which is its most powerful Ice-type move. This Pokemon has a massive special defense stat as well, which will be able to take special hits very easily. It also has access to Zap Cannon to also paralyze things, much like Regirock is able to. Audino functions a similar way, while being a very nice wall. It also can provide wish support to your team, which is another Pokemon we were considering when we were making this team, and also Musharna, which is a Pokemon I had on this team for a little while as well, because this Pokemon is defensive, can set up gravity, and also has access to Hypnosis as well, much like Exeggutor, to easily put something to sleep once the effects of gravity are up. So if you do want to consider making a gravity team for yourself, here are a few other Pokemon to consider that would work extremely well under the effects of gravity or for setting it up. But that is it for this video, everyone, so I hope you all stay tuned for some battles. Unlike in the first video where I put some battles up at the end, I figure I'll just upload these slowly throughout the week so that you guys don't get overexposed to gravity in this one video. So look forward to those and seeing how this team works in action. But overall, that is it for this video, everyone, so thank you all for watching, take care, goodbye, and I hope to see you next time, and hope to see you wishing to try out gravity more in the future.